So when I was in the Book of Enoch a few episodes ago, there was something that caught my attention. I was reading something this was in Enoch chapter 15. I didn't read the whole chapter on that episode, but I did read through it just as part of doing my research. And there was this very interesting tidbit in there about the spirits of the Nephilim. Enoch chapter 15 makes the claim basically that when a Nephilim dies, its spirit roams the earth, afflicts humans, and is going to continue to do so until the world ends. So, in other words, the spirits of the Nephilim are demons. The Book of Enoch makes a distinction between the fallen angels, the ones who rebelled with Satan, and demons, saying that the fallen angels, those are beings that God basically created originally, but the demons were something that came along later. They were created when those fallen angels mated with human women, which was told about in Genesis 6. And so that distinction, that really goes against what I've been told all my life growing up in church. I've always been told that demons and fallen angels are just the exact same thing. That the 1/3 of the angels who rebelled against God, that those are the demons that we frequently read about in the New Testament. But the Book of Enoch has a different perspective on these evil spirits. And so this is not a podcast about weird stuff in the Book of Enoch. This podcast is called Weird Stuff in the Bible. And I do not use the Book of Enoch to replace my biblical understanding, but I do wonder whether this idea about the origin of demons, whether it's congruent with what Scripture actually teaches. Because as we're going to see today, Scripture doesn't outright state that the demons and the fallen angels are the exact same thing. So I find all this to be weird, and I'd like to explore if it's in the Bible. So turn with me to Isaiah 26, and let's get weird. Welcome to Weird Stuff in the Bible, where we explore scripture passages that are bizarre, perplexing, or just plain weird. This is Luke Taylor, and today we're going to be talking about whether demons and fallen angels are synonyms or if they are distinct categories. And so I said turn to Isaiah 26. We're going to get there in a few minutes. But first, let me just share a little bit of this passage from the Book of Enoch, and that's where all of this started for me. So Enoch 15, this has a message for the Watchers, aka the sons of God. And they had mated with human women, and they had produced these offspring that are called the Nephilim. And God is telling these Watchers that they should have kept their place up in heaven instead of descending to earth, because then if they had stayed in heaven, they would have been immortal and they would have experienced eternal life. But he says, now you will die like men, which in this case does not mean they're going to perish into non-existence. It means they'll be consigned to hell. And so with dying in the sense kind of like the second death that you read about in the book of Revelation. And so anyway, Enoch, chapter 15 of Enoch, and then it has verse 8. And this is what it says. Again, these are the words from God himself. It says, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Verse 9 continues, evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy Watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on the earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. And then I will skip down to verse 12 of that chapter. I just want to read that verse there. It says, and these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. And so according to the Book of Enoch there, in chapter 15 is where I just read from, when the Watchers, or the sons of God, when they created offspring with human women, these children were giants. And it says that their spirits will be evil, and that these evil spirits will proceed from the bodies of the giants, and they are going to roam the earth, and they're going to afflict humanity. And these evil spirits, they sound a whole lot like the demons that we read about in the New Testament. I mean, isn't that how they sound to you? Throughout the New Testament, we frequently see Jesus casting demons out of people who are possessed or oppressed by demons. And you notice like these people, a lot of times they seem mentally unstable. They cut themselves. They behave erratically. They're self-destructive. They attack people sometimes. They throw themselves into fire. They curse God. They seem kind of like schizophrenic or bipolar, like they have a split personality. And so people who are afflicted by these things, they have mental and physical problems. And sometimes God heals somebody from a sickness or a physical malady. And Jesus will say sometimes that there was an evil spirit that was causing it. I was just reading this week. I've been reading through the Book of Luke here lately. There's a woman who could not stand up straight for a number of years. And then Jesus, he delivers her and he says that Satan had bound her, that he had caused her issues where she couldn't stand up straight. So Jesus's main ministry, as you read through the Gospels, the most common thing that he did was deliver people, deliverance ministry. When I say deliverance, I mean setting people free from demonic spirits. Now, I'm not telling you just because you know somebody who has back problems or mental issues, don't just assume that means there's a spiritual issue, like there's a spiritual cause to it, okay? Doesn't mean that you just need to go cast a demon out of, everybody who needs to go to the chiropractor. But if we take the Bible seriously, we should be willing to consider if there could be a spiritual reason behind someone's physical problems, behind someone's mental problems. Not saying that they're possessed, okay? That's not what I'm saying. Not saying they literally have a demon inside of them, but they could be oppressed by a demon. See, there is a difference in demonic possession and demonic oppression, but either way, both of those situations, they need deliverance. And that was the most frequent thing that Jesus did for people. And so, just pray for wisdom when you're praying for people. Ask God for enlightenment or understanding on how to pray for somebody or yourself if you're struggling with those things. And so, anyway, let me read a verse here from Enoch chapter 15 again. Let me go back to this. It says, "And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them." So again, that just sounds like the evil spirits that Jesus would encounter in the New Testament. The New Testament calls these things demons or unclean spirits or evil spirits. And so if we pair our New Testament with a Book of Enoch understanding, these spirits were not the fallen angels who were part of the 1/3 of angels who rebelled against God. These spirits are the spirits of the Nephilim, and they were actually created in Genesis chapter 6, and as well as from the Nephilim who came along after the flood, starting in Numbers 13, I think. So let me say this. If you're not on board with the spiritual view of the sons of God and the Nephilim from Genesis 6, if you're not familiar with that, or if you're not a fan of that view, you probably haven't even listened this far into this episode today. But if you're not sure what I'm talking about, I give some more info on the creation of the Nephilim, both before and after the flood. And so if you're looking for that information, I'd recommend you scroll back to last December on this podcast and look at episodes 5 through 8, and I explain it all in those episodes. So that's what you could go back to if you need to do that. So let's talk about whether this idea of demons being the spirits of the Nephilim, let's talk about whether that is supported or rejected by the text of the Bible. And so my first question would be, do we have any verses in the Bible that suggest or claim that demons and fallen angels are the same thing? Because I tell you what, if I went over to my theology bookshelf right now, I have bookcases of theology books, and I can tell you the vast majority of them, if they speak about this, I am certain that the vast majority of them would say, yes, absolutely, demons are just the angels who rebelled against God with Satan. Okay? If you go to gotquestions.org, that's usually a pretty solid, dependable website if you're looking for answers on Christian theology. Gotquestions.org will even say this, quote, "There is no doubt these fallen angels are now known as the demons." So most theology books are going to tell you that, but do we have a verse in the Bible that states this supposed fact? The answer to that question is no. Okay, we have verses that speak of demons and evil spirits, and we have verses that speak of angelic beings who rebelled against God, but we don't have any verses that tell us that all of these beings are the exact same beings. Okay, and if I'm wrong about that, I mean, feel free to email me. Okay. Leave a comment if you're on a platform that takes comments, or you could send me an email, crossreferencespodcast@gmail.com. I put it in the show notes on every episode. I love feedback. So feel free to send me if you got a verse that you think illuminates this. If you have a verse that suggests that they're the same beings, I'd be glad to accept it, but I can't find it anywhere. So, do we have anywhere in the Bible that suggests that the spirits of the Nephilim are what become the demons? Okay, and we don't have one that says it explicitly like we do in Enoch, but we do have some consistency with that idea in the book of Isaiah, chapter 26. And this is why I said turn to Isaiah 26 like 10 minutes ago. But Isaiah 26 is what I want to look at today. And let's just look at verses 13 and 14. O Lord our God, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance. They are dead, they will not live. They are shades, they will not arise. To that end you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. Now, I know we just jumped right there into the midst of like a larger passage, obviously. So you might be wondering what the context here is. And what I want to focus on really is these words, they are shades, they will not arise. So if you read this passage as a whole, it's making a distinction here in God's enemies versus God's friends. Especially if you go down to verse 19 of that chapter, it makes the point that God's friends go up, but God's enemies do not. So it's comparing them in verse 14 right here to evil spirits. It says in verse 14, they are shades, they will not arise. Okay? So if we dig into the Hebrew a bit, this word shades right here is Rapha. And if that word Rapha sounds a little familiar, I've just been seeing it in the news a lot lately. Okay? In the Gaza Strip right now, I'm recording this a couple weeks before you hear it, but in the Gaza Strip right now, this is where Israel is fighting the Hamas terrorists. And this is like the last stronghold of where these Hamas people are holed up right now. They maybe by the time you hear this, they've already got it. But right now, that's where Israel's fighting. And this Gaza Strip was actually demonic territory back in biblical times. Okay, and so I find it kind of interesting. Hamas is a biblical word. I think I've mentioned that before. That Hamas is a Hebrew word that means violence. You know, as in God destroyed the world in Genesis 6 because the heart of man was filled with Hamas, was filled with violence. And so it's kind of intriguing to me. We have these terrorists who call themselves Hamas, and they're retreating back to Gaza's capital city, and that city is named Rapha. And that is the same word in the Old Testament that describes giants after the flood. It says they are the descendants of Rapha. And they were originally called the Nephilim in Numbers 13. So these are the Nephilim after the flood. And then they went to a city that was called Gath, and they were called the Gathites then. And then in 2 Samuel 21, you learn that the giants in Gath were descended from someone named Rapha. And so then they were called the Rephaim. And I trace all of this in episode 8 of this podcast. It's called Nephilim after the flood. And so Rephaim, that's a name for giants by the time of the book of Isaiah. And even though I don't think the giants are around anymore by this point, they've been killed off finally. But so what's it talking about here when it talks about the Rephaim? Well, Isaiah makes the comment that the spirits of the Rephaim will not rise. That's what this phrase, it says they are shades, they will not rise. That's what that means. He's not going into a demonology lesson right there, okay? He's making it just as kind of an offhand comment. Like this was just common knowledge to them. Okay. It says, God's enemies are going to be like the spirits of the Rephaim. They're not going to go up. They will not rise. Okay. He's just making it like everybody knows that, So why would he do that? Well, I believe it's because for the ancient Jews, this was common knowledge to them. Like this was part of their worldview. This was their demonology. He says they are Rapha, they are shades, they will not arise. And that sounds a whole lot like what the Book of Enoch said. It said, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. That's what the Book of Enoch said about them. So if the spirits of the Rapha are constrained to the earth, that would not be characteristic, actually, with what we learn about the sons of God and the fallen angels throughout the rest of the Bible. Okay, for example, Satan and the other fallen angels, as you study the Bible closely, you see that they're able to meet with God and converse with God and go up to heaven and talk to God. At least Satan is. He's allowed to go up to heaven and crash the party. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if he's invited up. Invited up there. A lot of weird stuff goes on that we just don't really know about in the spiritual realm. That would probably surprise a lot of us to see God having a conversation with Satan, or God using Satan for his purposes to carry out God's will throughout the earth. And so that's very strange to imagine that happening. But because we kind of have this cartoony vision in our heads that God's on a throne up in heaven and Satan's on a throne down in hell, and they're launching their armies at each other all the time. And I'm not sure it works it's not that simple, I don't think. We see from the book of Job that Satan and other fallen angels, they are allowed a seat at the table when it comes to God's divine council meetings, where it's determining what's going to happen down on the earth. 1 Kings 22, there's a vision that speaks of this. And so this idea that the spirits of the Nephilim, that they're constrained to the earth, that would be a contrast to how we see the fallen angels and Satan interacting with God in other places of the Bible. And so some will say, don't Jude and 2 Peter talk about the evil angels? They were chained away in hell. But that verse in Jude and 2 Peter, those verses actually refer specifically to the sons of God, or the watchers, who had sexual relations with women in Genesis 6. Those verses are not talking about fallen angels in general, or all evil spirits in general. It's referring to a specific group of fallen angels. But the ones who didn't commit that sin, they may have still rebelled against God, but they didn't do that specific sin. And so they are still kind of free to do their dirty work. If they're dirty spirits, the evil angels, they're free to do what they're wanting to do, and try to disrupt God's plans for planet Earth, or whatever it is that they're up to. So back to the book of Enoch for a moment. If we go one verse further in Enoch, this would be the first verse of chapter 16. It says this, and this is a long sentence, by the way. It says, "From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment, thus shall they destroy until the day of consummation, the great judgment in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers, and the godless, shall be wholly consumed." So I know that was a long sentence. What is that saying? It says that when the giants die, from their souls will go forth evil spirits, and that these evil spirits are going to be a destructive force on the earth from then until Judgment Day. Which that reminds me of a verse when Jesus encounters the demons in Mark 5, and they say, "Have you come to?" I'm kind of speaking from memory. I think they say, "Have you come to destroy us before the time?" In other words, they're acknowledging there is a judgment day coming for them, and they're asking Jesus, "Are you here to take care of us before we get to that point?" And so, anyway, it kind of just goes along with that as well. But all of this is in contrast to what Enoch said earlier about the sons of God who were locked away. They were locked away for creating these spirits. The rebellious sons of God who did that, those are the angels who are locked away in hell. The spirits of the Nephilim, that is what we have to fight while we're here on the earth. And this was the worldview of the ancient Israelites. Like, this was present in some other ancient books, the Book of Jubilees, chapter 10 of that, which I have not read. I'm just telling you what I've learned in my research here. I'm just sharing a citation, okay? The Testament of Solomon, chapter 5. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, they state this. The Dead Sea Scrolls refers to the spirits of the Nephilim. It refers to them as spirits of impurity, which sounds a whole lot like the New Testament's term that it oftentimes uses for demons. It calls them unclean spirits. And so we see this idea very commonly in ancient Jewish or Israelite thought, Like, this was their worldview. We just don't see it explicitly stated in the Bible itself. Now, the Bible doesn't contradict it either. It just doesn't outright state it. And so I want to say two things as I close down today. I just want to say a couple things about this view that perhaps the demons actually originated from that they are the spirits of the Nephilim. Okay? If we take that view, I want to make a couple comments. One, this does not affect any major doctrine. So if you view demons as the same thing as fallen angels, that is fine. If you view the fallen angels as a different classification of spirit being from the demons, that is fine. All right? It really doesn't change anything about the practice of our faith as Christians. All right? We are, as we are just flesh and blood humans, for us, this matter is more academic than it is practical when it comes to like your daily life. All right. So we don't need to jump down anyone's throat if they take a different view on this than I do, or if you take a different one than someone else. It's okay. All right. I just want to put that out there. And two, maybe as we close down, I just want to wonder out loud about something. Okay. Just a question that I have. So demons have been around all throughout history, at least since the days of the flood up until today. Mankind has been putting up with demons all through that time. And yet we don't really see them manifesting in the Bible until you get to the New Testament. Okay, like that's when you start seeing Jesus dealing with all this deliverance and demon possession and all that stuff. And so you don't see that kind of stuff in the Old Testament, really. And so my question is, like, what's up with that? You get to the New Testament and like you have demons and possessed people on just about every page of the Gospels and in the Book of Acts. It's just like it's like an everyday occurrence for them. People in that society, they're just like, yeah, there's guys and girls out here who are afflicted by demons, possessed by demons. Like that's just a normal thing to them. And so if that's the case, why was that not really mentioned until you get to the New Testament? So I've just always kind of wondered about that. And if you have any thoughts on that, send them to my email, weirdstuffinthebible@gmail.com. And next time here on the podcast, I would like to step away from the Book of Enoch stuff for a while. I just want to talk about some random topics for a few episodes. And I don't know exactly where I'll be yet for next week, but I got like a list on my computer. So like every time I come across something weird in the Bible for the past few months, I'm like, oh man, that would be a great podcast episode. And so I stick it in my list to talk about it someday. And I think it's finally time that I get into that list a little bit. So I don't know what's coming for next week, but it'll be something just kind of random. I'm going to get away from, I'll come back to Enoch again someday. Like maybe in a few months, we'll come back around to it. I like looking at where it intersects with the Bible. Here's one thing I'm thinking about, as Jesus said, that his return is going to look like it was in the days of Noah. And I would kind of like to do an episode in a few weeks or in a few months, maybe, called The Days of Noah According to the Book of Enoch. And so I think that could maybe bring some illumination to our understanding of what's going on in the world. So we'll see. A mailbag or two that I want to share real quick. P. Hicks said about a recent episode on, I did one a few weeks ago called Did Jesus Quote from the Book of Enoch? And P. Hicks on that one said, weren't the Sadducees and Pharisees Jews? I don't see why they would have believed in life. I don't see why they wouldn't have believed in life after death. I'm not saying you're wrong or calling you a liar. It simply doesn't sit right with me. And so in response to that, absolutely, they were Jews. And the Sadducees in particular, because I talk about them on that podcast and how they just didn't really believe in the supernatural. They had kind of created this false religion, basically, like a spinoff of Old Testament Judaism. They basically believed that God was real and that God had created the world, but they didn't really believe in angels or the afterlife or miracles or anything else that was supernatural. So they were absolutely Jews. I believe, this is the interesting thing about the Sadducees, is that I think they were primarily Levites. And that's what's so shocking about them, is like they should have been the most spiritual of all the Jews, but instead they had become the least spiritual. And so it's kind of interesting. And I'm sure there's some lessons in there for us on that. That's why I kind of drew some parallels to a lot of these seminary professors nowadays, because they should be the most spiritual if they really are Bible scholars who study the Bible and all this stuff all the time, theology. And yet a lot of times seminary professors, if you look at the statistics, they are like the least likely to accept the miraculous. And so it's kind of shocking. And we see that kind of playing out with the Levites and becoming the Sadducees. So thank you for that comment, though, from P. Hicks. And I want to give a shout out real quick to two super fans. Number one is my wife. And I say that, I'm calling her a super fan because she's just constantly like telling people about the podcast. And I've got these like little business cards that they're just like little advertisements. It's like the only marketing that I do for the podcast is I've got these little business cards for it that I just will occasionally leave, at a gas station or something. But I tell you what, my wife leaves like 10 times as many of those things around as I do. So I just want to give a shout out to her for helping the podcast grow. It's really been growing great here the past couple months. And so I just appreciate her for that. And also want to give a shout out to a guy at my church named Tim. And I told him about my podcast one Wednesday night a few weeks ago. And like I ran into him again a week later, and he had listened to the whole series of episodes I've done so far, like all 22 or 23 that I had done to that point. And so that's really like, that's really kind of him to listen to them all. I appreciate that, Tim. And so if you're listening, thank you for that. And it's really like humbling to run into anyone who would ever take the time to listen to what I have to say. Like, I'm just even shocked somebody would. So shout out to a couple super fans right there. And I decree you both officially to be weirdos. All right. Because I was telling my wife a while back, I said, a lot of podcasts out there, if they get a fan base, they often have a name for that fan base. I don't know if anyone else knows what I'm talking about, but some podcasts will have a nickname for their fan base. And I was like, well, for weird stuff in the Bible, they should be called weirdos. And my wife looked at me like that was just one of the worst ideas she'd ever heard. So she gets to be the first one. And anyway, anybody who's listened to all 25 episodes of this podcast, by decree, you are a weirdo as well. And thanks for being here. All right, so I'm just going to have to cut it off right there for today because I'm actually really committed to keeping these episodes 30 minutes or less. I like to keep them about 20 minutes, and I just got going a little too long here in the mailbag segment. So I had some more thoughts I wanted to share on why the demons don't really show up until the New Testament, but I'll just save that for another time. And if you've got theories on that, send them my way, and we'll talk about it down the road. So thanks for listening today. And if listening to 25 episodes of a podcast called Weird Stuff in the Bible makes you a weirdo, then I hope that you will all be weirdos too. Thanks for listening. God bless you for sticking around till the end, and we'll see you next time.